In construction too, things that look like performance problems sort of masquerade as some of those warning signs, so where they're just not able to get the work done in the way that they used to. Those are things you kind of start to look at. And then what else is going on in their lives? Is there something else that's happening with them? Have they had a loss in any way recently? Are they going through a divorce? Are they dealing with a child who is sick or maybe having their own substance use problems? What does the rest of their ecosystem look like? And are all of these things sort of piling up on top of each other?
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regeter. Today, I'm joined by the Executive Director of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, Sonya Bohmann. In this episode, we explore the alarming suicide rates in the construction industry and the work being done to address it. Join us as we discuss prevention, intervention, and postvention strategies, and how we can better support the mental health of one of America's most at-risk workforces. This conversation could change the way you see mental health on the job site, and maybe even save a life. Sonya, thank you so much for joining me. I am very excited for our conversation. Before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
I'm well today, actually. It's not great weather-wise here, but I feel like summer is on its way, so I'll take it.
Where are you located again?
I'm right outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, so it's still a little cold there.
It shouldn't be, but it's chilly this week again, but we have lots of rain, so, new flowers will come out from that, so it'll be okay.
I love the optimism. I'm in Los Angeles right now, and it's still a little chilly. And I mean, I say chilly, it's like in the 60s.
That's probably about what we are today. Yeah.
Really? It's supposed to be warm and sunny here.
Yeah, I mean, it should be here too. Like typically in the beginning of June, we could be in the mid 80s.
Yeah. Oh, weather is so confusing.
I
But
know. I think the plants would agree with you. Not to sound like I guess there's a point where you'd start to become like a complete bird and plant nerd, which is where I think I'm at this point. But yeah, like I'm always out there being like, are my flowers gonna bloom? How long are they gonna stay blooming?
love it. So to jump in to our conversation today, we're going to talk about the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. So to start, can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So CIASP, as we like to call ourselves, started really, it's been about 10 years since the concept started. So in 2015, there was an article that was written in the Construction Financial Management Association's magazine called Building Profits. And it was written by Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas and Cal Beyer, who are really pioneers in this conversation. And they pointed out that there was a growing problem with suicide in construction and that we needed to do something about it. And so from there, CFMA started having summits around the country and really talking about how they could get behind this conversation. And in 2018, they ultimately decided that this was too big to be tucked up under another organization. And so we formed as a standalone 501c3, and the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention was born. Our board, who is made up of just absolutely amazing people. I like to a little jokingly say that I have a unicorn board because, lots of times in nonprofit, you've got some people that work towards the goal and some people that don't. But I'm so fortunate that I have this incredible group of people that are so mission focused that really, and many of them have been there, since the very early days. And those that are no longer on the board still support the board from those early days. That really they carried this organization from the time that it was, conceptualized all the way up until 2023, all on their own. So it was a 100% volunteer organization through COVID and through running their own businesses or associations or however way they were connected into the mission. And then I got to join the organization that already had a beautiful strategic plan in place and had lots of ideas on how we were to get us to the next level. So I really just get to sort of captain that ship.
I love that this is happening in the construction industry. I don't know. I think I talked about this when we first connected. I don't
Yeah.
know why I never thought about it. And my father works in construction, has forever. And I don't think this is even a conversation that we've had. And as a mental health advocate, as someone who's always talking about suicide prevention, I was just blown away that I never even thought about this. But this industry does have a very high rate of suicide.
Yeah. So if you take, the CDC numbers, so construction is number two, and when you add in extraction, it becomes number one for, deaths by suicide. It makes sense when you think about it, but it's not something that many people sort of correlate. There's lots of risk factors that apply to the construction industry that are maybe a little bit unique. It's really tough on your body. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of pressure to get a job to come in on time and under budget, and you carry a lot of that weight on your own. There's isolation sometimes, financial ups and downs, mere demographics. I mean, more men than women die by suicide, and frankly, there's more men in the construction industry.
That's so true. And thinking back, I mean, even now, my dad works all hours of the night. When he does go on the field, doesn't as much anymore, but when he does, I can just see it really exhausting him and his body. And it's just like you said, it's not something people think about.
But there's hope too, right? There are things that we can do from a protective factors, from creating cultures of care that allow us to change really what the industry used to be about and make it to something that A, people want to enter this industry, and two, that those that are really here get the resources that they need and recognize that it doesn't have to be the way that it used to be. Like, there's not a whole lot we can do about it being tough on our body, but there's lots and lots of new studies out that focus on ergonomics, and there are helmets instead of hard hats that protect our head from traumatic brain injuries. And there's so much focus on the safety, physical safety aspects of it, that we can now start focusing on the psychological safety aspects of it.
Okay, so what are some of the ways that CIASP is focusing on that mental component?
Yeah, absolutely. I think awareness has to be the start of it, because just like you didn't know that it has such a high rate, I don't know that our workers necessarily recognize that. And they recognize the resources that are available to them. So this past January, I had an opportunity to work very closely with a construction company local to Pennsylvania, and we trained about 600 of their workers, and about 10 of them knew what 988 was. So awareness is probably the first thing that we can all do, right? Is just start talking about it being a problem, and then what to do about it if you're not feeling your best self, if you're not feeling your own psychological safety, or if you recognize in someone else that they're struggling as well. What do you do for them?
Yeah, and back to your point before, the construction industry is mainly men who are taught to just like be strong. Isn't even a conversation they would think to have if they're feeling something, they likely feel bad for feeling that way and hold it in. And then, like you said, not knowing about 988, and that's something that's supposed to be national that everyone knows about. So to see how many people still don't, industry that's likely not to talk about it to begin with a population that's likely not to talk about it, this awareness piece is so important for prevention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so if I think that, the first place we could all start is simply just introducing our teams to 988, whether it's posters up on your job site, in your trailers, or even just in your restrooms, like any place that that people are going to be, that is an opportunity for them to just kind of see and be aware that there's a resource. And then once you know what the resource is, how to use it, and then creating places and spaces that it's okay to talk about your feelings, and it's okay to ask for help, recognizing that, what you're feeling, that mental health is a continuum, and that, you're not always going to feel great, but you shouldn't have to stay in a place where you're not feeling great, right? And how to access the resources that many of the companies have, such as your EAP or your health insurance. And if you don't have those things, what other resources are available for you?
Yeah, the insurance being able to get access to therapy
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
this can be so helpful, especially if you don't feel like there is space to talk about it at work. Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking about it in a population that's not talking about it, but being able to somewhere that you can is so incredibly important.
So one of the things that we do is that it's always been really important to our board and to who we are, as it's one of our core values, is to be able to provide resources that are ahead of a paywall. So whether you're a large, medium, or small construction company, you'll be able to access resources that you can use to get the conversation started. One of those is something as simple as we have something called a needs analysis that allows a company to walk through this sort of, I call it kind of a choose your own adventure. And so, do you have this in place? And if yes, then who's responsible? And if no, here's what you need to do that. And it allows you to kind of make sure you've walked through all of those steps. 100% free. You can download it in both English and in Spanish. And then really how to start engaging our people, our teams in that conversation is that we've got toolbox talks. So almost everyone in the industry uses toolbox talks. They're anywhere between, I would say, 10 to 15-minute conversations, and they go with the word stand, which is sort of our tagline to stand up to suicide prevention. So S is for safety, T is for training, A is for awareness, N is for normalize, and D is for decrease. And so you can use them once a day for an entire week. You can use them once a week for a month. You can use them once a month for 5 months, whatever it looks like in your rotation of toolbox talks to get the conversation started. They're also in both English and in Spanish, but it's a great way to introduce the conversation to mid-level management and our people on our job sites so that they start becoming aware of the fact that it's okay to talk about our feelings. It's okay to recognize warning signs and then what to do about it when you do. What does a conversation look like when you're worried about someone that you care about?
Conversation and making sure there's access to resources is so important. My favorite part, though, is that it's basically a map, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, here's the next step. No, here's this, because people
Yeah,
don't know
absolutely.
what to do. And it often becomes this paralyzing decision of, well,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do. No one's really talking about it, providing me with the tools. So let's just ignore it, sweep it under the rug.
Right. Let's just not put a program together. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that culture of care is really being able to give people the tools that they need. So if we can create that culture, then they can create that culture as well. And so one of the other things that we have that kind of carries that conversation along, and you talked about it a few minutes ago, is that people aren't always willing to ask for help in an environment where no one's asking for help, or we're not having this conversation. So we do have a mental health screening tool on our website for someone who says, like, I'm not sure about what I'm feeling. I'm not sure if what I'm feeling is normal or typical, or if I maybe need to get some help. And so you can walk through this mental health screening tool, and it allows you to say, you know what, at the end, it'll tell you, listen, I think that what you're feeling is completely normal based on the way that you answered these questions, or you should probably look to get some additional help, seek a doctor, go to through your health insurance or through your EAP, or it'll say, there's some concerning signs here, and I think you should reach out to 988 or some additional immediate support. And then they're able to kind of move forward with what they want to do. But it has a double layer of anonymity. So we don't collect any identifying information. It goes to a website that doesn't collect any identifying information. And it really allows them to, it's not a diagnostic tool, but a bit of a baseline. But it really allows someone an opportunity to have a little control over a process that they're probably feeling is out of their control.
I don't know if something is wrong is such a valid question. And especially when it's normalized to live in a high stress, to work
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
in a culture that's very high productivity and hustle culture,
Mhm.
it's really hard to distinguish, is this a healthy level of stress that's
Right.
motivating, pushing me forward, or is this a dangerous level of stress that's leading to burnout, that's leading to psychological symptoms that could result
Right.
in suicide or just really debilitating symptoms. So
Yeah.
to ensure that there's access to like a questionnaire that can tell you this is you're doing great, or maybe let's connect you to some resources.
What's great about the screening as well is that it's not just about sort of your stress or your mental health, but maybe you're concerned about whether or not you are overusing a substance, or if you are having an eating disorder, or if you've got an anger management problem. It'll kind of help screen for a lot of that as well, and gives you an opportunity to sort of just pick and choose kind of how you want to take the screening.
Wait, I love that it includes eating disorder because especially for men, that's not something that's talked about much at all.
Yeah,
This is amazing. Okay,
a
so the
great
first
option.
component is the prevention and awareness. I know there's three.
So I think that if you're kind of looking at, you've got what we call prevention and then there's intervention. So how do you have a conversation and what does that look like? How do you say to someone, are you thinking of suicide? Which is the scariest question you might have to ever ask someone. But how do you do that? And how do you prepare yourself for it? And how do you practice that? And of course, we've got some tools that will allow you to do that as well. You can take Living Work Start training on our website, which allows you to walk through a 60 to 90-minute self-paced introduction to suicide prevention where it introduces you to the concept of asking that question. So that's sort of your intervention. And there's, some other resources around what that looks like as well. And then there's postvention. And all of us hope we never have to have that conversation, but the reality is that we might, or we might need to support someone who's going through the grieving process, whether it's we lost someone on a job site because of suicide or from a fatal worker injury or any number of other things that could happen in their outside world as well. How do we support that person?
I love these three breakdowns. Postvention is almost never talked about, and that's
Uh,
so important. I do want to talk about intervention and then come back to that because
yeah, sure.
something we need to be talking about. But intervention, what to say? I mean, I can say as someone who talks about like mental health and suicide all day long, every day,
Mhm.
therapist trainee, sometimes it still feels awkward to say like, are you having thoughts of suicide? And if we don't learn how to have that conversation to feel comfortable asking, to feel comfortable responding if someone does say yes,
Right.
very difficult.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. And I think that, first of all, not everyone's going to ever get to the point that they are comfortable with it. I mean, we would love for that to be the case, but if we can have one or two people on a job site trained to be able to recognize the signs and then be able to have that conversation, then think about how many lives that we can save. Because really, it's that moment between someone having their suicidal ideation and then being able to have their access to lethal means or carry out that allows us that space where, and if we can create more time in between that, that's where you save those lives. So allowing for someone to recognize that someone is exhibiting some warning signs and then having a conversation with them about that kind of opens up that space even more.
It really does. So many people. I mean, I know just in my own experience, if someone had asked that question,
Sure.
it could have made such a difference because it
Mhm.
wouldn't have felt like it was all in my head and maybe I'm being dramatic and no one takes me seriously and I need to just like get over it. I'm a burden. All these like mixed thoughts in my head.
Right.
If
Yeah,
someone asked that question, so what if more people were asking that question or able to just recognize the warning signs? Maybe it's even for themselves to say, like, hey,
exactly.
I need support, or for others and helping them get that support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really, I don't want to say what's interesting, but what's sort of universal, I guess I would say, about the warning signs is that they're not specific to construction. While certainly some of the risk factors are specific to construction, we all sort of exhibit some of the same signs, things like what people will say or what people will do or, what's happening in the world around them as well. So saying something as it might be seem as flippant as I don't want to be here anymore, or my family would be better off with my insurance check versus my paycheck. Those are start things to start to say, like that's unusual conversation for this person, right? And when we see those changes in a pattern of behavior and we have people saying things like, I'm worthless, or, nobody cares about me, or I'm a burden to anyone. Those are some real signs to start to tune into. And you can use them on a job site. You can use them within your family. You can use them if you are a leader of a youth group or whatever that looks like. But wherever you're interacting with people, you now get to tune in a different way.
It is very universal. And something you said that's so powerful. I never even thought about if someone was thinking or saying, maybe my family would be better off with my insurance check than my paycheck. That's huge. And that's a big, I mean, we're living in a world where our economy is not in the best place and
Right?
cost of eggs are going up, getting more and more expensive to live.
It
To
is. Yeah.
recognize that this is a very important. discussion and thought pattern we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Oftentimes in construction too, things that look like performance problems sort of masquerade as some of those warning signs. So someone who's now suddenly coming into work late or is jumping to conflict more or is there but not quite there. So some of that we call presenteeism, where they're just not able to get the work done in the way that they used to. And especially if this isn't their norm, then that's another one of those signs. Coupled with maybe some of the things that they're saying, you might say, well, this is definitely not who this person normally is. Like I can usually count on them to get things done, or maybe would be the person I would leave in charge if I can't be there. And now I don't feel like I can count on them. Those are things you kind of start to look at. And then what else is going on in their lives? Is there something else that's happening with them? Have they had a loss in any way recently? Are they going through a divorce? Are they dealing with a child who is sick or maybe having their own substance use problems? What does the rest of their ecosystem look like? And are all of these things sort of piling up on top of each other? And then you have those risk factors on top of that as well. It really becomes that perfect storm.
And that performance aspect,
Mhm.
right? Construction industry, like you said before, if there's tight deadlines, there's this pressure to be under budget. And when things, so many times things don't go right, the amount of
Right.
times my father's called me and just really frustrated, venting because
Mhm.
a truck broke down on the highway and a job is not going to get delivered on time, or it was raining and the weather messed up hitting that deadline. And
Absolutely.
so
Yep.
much. And when all these things can go wrong, so many of them out of your control,
Mhm.
or more likely, I'd say, well, I can't speak for every industry. A little bit I know is from my dad. But people are seem to be more likely to get fired if it's performance issues, right? Because
Absolutely.
costs a lot to have insurance for people in this industry. So if we think that, oh, they just don't care, they're not trying, we
Mhm.
might fire them when really we needed some kind of intervention. And that's why I love that you're
Absolutely.
creating the resources for these conversations.
I mean, that's really, where we start to make a difference is when we talk to people and recognize that, this is out of the norm for them. This is a change in a pattern of behavior that's not their typical. Of course, we all have people that come to work late or maybe can't pull their own weight or is not the person that you count on. But when you've got that person that's your steady Eddie and you're always kind of looking to them to be your partner in crime, so to speak, or your partner in positivity, whatever you want to say about that. But that person that you count on, and now you're questioning that, it's not always as simple as they've just decided to slack off, right? It's probably a little deeper than that, and it helps to dig a little deeper in that conversation.
Again, I would say as a whole, our culture is a lot more likely to just kind of we often see people as disposable, especially
Sometimes, yeah.
in the work industry. And
Mhm.
if we're not really paying attention to people's life and what they're going through, we're not seeing people as people and human first, and we're looking at profits, it really can lead to these increase in suicide rates, just these increase in feeling disconnected, feeling
Mhm.
isolated.
Well, I think that's the beauty of creating that culture of care, right? Is that we all recognize that we're working together on solving problems. And so we're looking out for each other as well. And what does that look like? And what does it look like when you have that from the top down? And so everybody is sort of rowing in the same direction and you've got that support. When we talk about leadership support or management support, it doesn't have to be the person who necessarily has that title, but it's the person that everyone looks to as the leader. And if they can start leading this conversation or being open and vulnerable to their own conversation, then it really does make a difference.
It does. When our leadership is talking about it, opens the door for it's okay to talk about it. I'm not going to get
Right.
fired talking about this. I'm not going to be looked down on for talking about this. I'm not going to risk my job. Talk about it. And moving on to postvention, because
Sure.
there was very little conversation on what to do in the aftermath. And then
Mhm.
there's this misunderstanding on what grief is, who's allowed to grieve, how it's supposed to look. And without these conversations, so many people just struggle through it silently.
Yeah, I mean, I think postvention is probably the hardest piece of this puzzle, right? It is definitely the one that needs the most work or the biggest gap we have to fill. We've got some great people out there doing things already. So I mentioned Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas and Cal Beyer, and there's a document that they've worked through it's called A Manager's Guide to Postvention, I believe. And then I can share it and you can share it out as a resource afterwards. But it really kind of is a document to walk a company through what that looks like. So if you had a workplace suicide, there's some other pieces out there. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention just came out with one as well. It's lengthy, but there's some really great stuff in there. But really just kind of recognizing one, having a safety plan, as many of our companies do, but making sure that in your safety plan that you include things like overdose and you include things like suicide so that you know what to do in the aftermath of that. Something as simple as what you do with the site, right? And then what you do, because that affects how the people are affected, right? And then how you take care of your people afterwards. And what does that look like? And what does the additional support look like? And how do you make sure that you are giving them the appropriate space to talk about this, and that you are not sort of sweeping it under the rug as if it never happened, but the support mechanisms that go with that as well. And it really makes a difference in creating that culture of care.
I can only imagine the difference it makes. And like you said, instead of sweeping it under the rug, that's because there's such a stigma when it comes to suicide and mental health, and then
Mhm.
add it to the industry, add it to the population. It's a lot just easier to pretend like it never happened than to
Right.
open up a conversation because, first of all, you don't know what to say. You don't know what to feel. Do I have a right to
Sure.
know? What is that supposed to look like? It
Mhm.
becomes very overwhelming.
I think also the question becomes like, is this workplace conversation, right? Should we, or what should we, or what's our liability, or how do we? So there's so many questions around how to approach it, if you should approach it, if approaching it makes it worse. There's so many layers to it. And, how to do it properly is scary as well, because does the conversation lie with human resources? Does it lie with your safety team? And so having your plan ahead of time makes all of the difference, obviously. And making sure that everybody is versed in the plan so that nobody is saying, well, it's his problem or it's her problem or it's their problem. And we don't know what to quite do in that case. Really does make a difference. And being creating safe spaces for people to talk and creating spaces where people can get some additional assistance if they need it, and recognizing what resources you have available already to be able to utilize as well really does really make the process either go poorly or go as well as it can in the light of something that happened that catastrophically.
I really love the idea of the safety plan and prepping beforehand because also in the aftermath, there's just so much emotions happening. And like you said, all these questions are cycling through. It's really hard to make any decisions and
Sure.
to be able to act in any way. So to have that guide ready and there can really make sure that we're setting everyone up for, I don't want to say success, but setting everyone up in a way to grieve in a more healthy manner.
Right. I mean, so in construction, we're always talking about physical safety, right? And so we address these things from a physical safety standpoint. But if we're including what would happen in light of a suicide or an overdose, then we are properly preparing for what that looks like.
Going back to that safety planning, what do you think are some of the hardest parts to getting ready to start creating that plan when it comes to the mental health aspect?
I think really just recognizing that suicide has to be part of the conversation, right? And then, addressing what that would look like on your job site. Does that mean that you have to plan for additional resources to come in? Do you have to have grief counseling? Do you have to have chaplain services? Do you have to have additional people from your EAP there to support that conversation? Do you need to have private spaces set aside that you may not already have on a job site? So do you need to bring an additional trailer in? Just all of those pieces that go with that, and really flushing that out as a team beforehand so that they know and have lined out what those steps need to be.
I love the specifics of the questions too, because it really does break it down piece by piece. And now this is all accessible on your website.
We do have most of those documents available as well. Yeah. And as we continue to work through some of the things that we have coming up, so one of the projects that we're working on for 2025 is something called a pathway, where someone can take our pledge to stand up to suicide prevention, move to that needs analysis, and then once they do the needs analysis, wherever they've created gaps, we've got a building that we call it that you can build out your awareness piece, you can build out your intervention piece, or you can build out your postvention component. And they don't have to go in succession. So you might enter the conversation from a postvention place and then recognize, okay, now that we've dealt with this, we've got to build some awareness to keep this from happening again. Or we've got the awareness and we unfortunately have already gone through the postvention, but what do we do in the interim to, now that we've gotten people recognizing the signs, what do they do with them? So how do they have that conversation? So maybe you need to start at the intervention piece of it. And so we'll continue to curate all of these tools into one place, and so that someone can use the pathway to build their own mental health and wellness program.
And just, again, I really love when it's a walkthrough, when it gives you that step by step, because it is overwhelming. If it's something that you've never really approached before, talked about before, not knowing where to start is one of the main reasons people don't start. So
Exactly. Right.
it's so creative with the building as well. I love that. You are saying the work that you're doing is amazing. As we are wrapping up, what's one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with?
The fact that anyone can do something in this conversation. So you don't have to have letters or qualifications after your name, but you can always ask someone how they're doing. You can always check in on a friend. You can always share a post supporting mental health or suicide prevention to be that ally. Anyone can do anything.
That is so true. We all have a voice. We all have the
We do.
ability to make a difference. For our listeners who want to get involved, access resources, how can they connect?
You can follow us at preventconstructionsuicide.com. We also post on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So you can follow us at the CIASP or the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website, inspiringmygeneration.org, to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.